Good morning, dear teachers, and of course to our professor, Doc Bong Federa. We are Group 8, and today we will present to you the topics in Unit 3, which is about implementing the curriculum. I am Eleanor Mallorca, your first presenter, and I'm assigned to discuss the first subtopic, which is implementing the design curriculum as a change process. The teacher as a curriculum implementer and a manager. There is a minuscule curriculum like our lesson plan or a big one like the K-12 curriculum. And us, teachers, will be both the implementer and the manager of these curricula. We will put an action to what has been planned and designed. We can implement this curriculum by using different learning styles, making the discussion interesting and engaging, and of course, unforgettable. As we have mentioned in our previous topics, we teachers are considered as curriculum implementer. Once we are done in planning and designing our curriculum, our next step is to implement it. This is our major role that we do in school. Guided by the recommended curriculum that are written, our next task as teachers is to implement it. Daily, our plans should be always ready for implementation. That is why we are always tasked to prepare first our lesson plans or DLLs, daily lesson logs, before doing or teaching a certain topic or competency. Why? Maybe for us to be able to review the content and check whether the approaches and techniques that we're going to use is applicable. We should always remember that the success of the learning depends on our implementation efforts. The first subtopic is implementing the design curriculum as a change process. So as we said before, change is really inevitable in the curriculum development. Why? It is in order for the curriculum to be relevant, to be able to cater the changing demands and needs of the society, and especially to the needs of the diverse learners. So below are the learning objectives under this subtopic. First, define curriculum implementation. Second, analyze what is change process in curriculum implementation and explain the process of curriculum implementation. Curriculum implementation defined. Let's have the various definitions of curriculum implementation. Curriculum implementation is the next step to curriculum designing. This is the phase where teacher action takes place. It is one of the most crucial processes in curriculum development, although many education planners would say a good plan is work half done. If this is so, then the half of the success of curriculum development rests in the hands of the implementer, who is the teacher. Curriculum implementation means putting into practice the written curriculum that has been designed in syllabi, course of study, curricular guides, and subjects. So it is a process where the learners acquire or learn the planned or intended knowledge, skills, and attitudes that are aimed at enabling them to function effectively in society. For Ornstein and Hankins in 1988, they defined curriculum implementation as the interaction between the curriculum that has been written and planned and the persons or teachers who are in charge to deliver it. So for them, curriculum implementation implies or involves the following. First, shift from what is current to a new or enhanced curriculum. Second, change in knowledge, actions, attitudes of the persons involved. Third, change in behavior using new strategies and resources. And fourth, change which requires efforts, hence goals should be achievable. So in short, curriculum implementation for Umstein and Hankins simply indicates or involves a change in different aspects or areas related in education like what we have mentioned earlier. For Lux and Lieberman in 1983, Curriculum implementation is the trying out of a new practice and what it looks like when actually used in a school system. It simply means that implementation should bring the desired change and improvement. In the classroom context, curriculum implementation means teaching what has been written in the lesson plan. Implementing means using the plan as a guide to engage with learners in the teaching-learning process, with the end in view that learning has occurred and learning outcomes had been achieved. It involves the different strategies of teaching with the support of instructional materials to go with the strategy. In a larger scale, curriculum implementation means putting the curriculum into operation with different implementing agents. So curriculum implementation may take place in a class, in a district, a division, or the whole educational system. In higher education, curriculum implementation for the course, a degree program, the institution, or the whole higher education system. It requires time, money, personal interaction, personal contacts, and support. Curriculum implementation as a change process. Kurt Lewin's force field theory and curriculum change can be used to explain curriculum change and implementation. So who is Kurt Lewin and what is his theory all about? Kurt Lewin is the father of social psychology who explains the process of change. According to him, there are always two forces that oppose each other in an education landscape. These are the driving force and the restraining force. When these two forces are equal, the state is equilibrium or balance, and there will be no change. The situation or condition will stay the same. However, when the driving force overpowers the restraining force, then change will occur. And if the opposite happens, that is when the restraining force is stronger than the driving force, change is prevented. This is the idea of Kurt Lewin in his force field theory, and we can use this to explain what is curriculum change. According to Lewin, change will be better if the restraining forces shall be decreased rather than increasing the driving force. So we have to focus more on decreasing the restraining forces like fear, lack of training, limited technological training for teachers and outdated school facilities, and lack of staff. These restraining forces should be decreased so that a positive change or a better change will occur. So let's take this one as an example. We will score each force according to their magnitude ranging from 1 as the weakest to 5 as the strongest. So as you can see in the illustration, it shows that there are driving forces on the left and the resisting forces or restraining forces on the right. Given their respective scores, the illustration shows equilibrium since driving forces are equal to the restraining forces. But according to Lewin, in order to have a better change, we have to decrease the restraining forces. So say for example, we have already decreased the restraining forces and we are able to lower its corresponding strength scores in 2 with a total of 10, then change will occur since driving forces are now stronger and it overpowers the restraining force, or the restraining forces rather. So that's what Kurt Lewin's force field theory all about. I will now end my presentation here. And the next topic, categories of curriculum change, will be explained to us by the next presenter, Ms. Roldan. Thank you for watching and I hope that you have learned something from this presentation.
Good day everyone, especially to our professor, Dr. Bong Fadera. I will be reporting implementing a curriculum daily in the classrooms and revise Bloom's taxonomy. I am AIZA MAGRACIA, your reporter for today. Now let's begin with implementing a curriculum daily in the classroom. We all know that high-quality implementation of educational approaches can have a significant impact on improving student outcomes. That's why DepEd recognizes that instructional planning is essential to successful teaching and learning. In Article 4, Section 2, Code of Ethics for Professional Teachers, state that every teacher shall uphold the highest standards of quality education, shall make the best preparations for the career of teaching, and shall be at his best at all times in the practice of his profession. So teaching activity is like implementing a minuscule curriculum. A daily lesson plan is based on planned or written curriculum. It contains direct steps that are to be followed for proper implementation and purpose, which will be put to action by the teacher in the classroom. Before the lesson ends, the teacher must find out if the students have truly learned. Now let us see how this process will be shown. DepEd Order Number 70, Series of 2012, it states that teachers of all public elementary and secondary schools will not be required to prepare detailed lesson plans. They may adopt daily lesson logs, which contain the needed information and guide from the teacher guide and teacher manual reference material with page number, interventions given to the students, and remarks to indicate how many students have mastered the lesson or are needing intervention. However, teachers with less than 2 years of teaching experience shall be required to prepare daily lesson plans, which shall include the following: objectives, subject matter, procedure, assessment, and assignment. So as teachers, we should prepare lesson plans that will comply with the necessary components asked by the Department of Education. Those who are employed in private schools may have different lesson plan format, but the fundamental parts will be the same. In line with the implementation of Republic Act 10533 or the Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, the Department of Education issues the enclosed policy guidelines on daily lesson preparation for the K-12 Basic Education Program, DepEd Order Number 42 Series of 2016. So this DepEd Order provides the guidelines in the preparation of daily lessons through the DLP and DLL by teachers in K-12. This aims to support teachers in organizing and managing their classes and lessons effectively and efficiently and ensure the achievement of learning outcomes. Who are required to prepare a DLL or DLP? Applicant teachers as well as teachers in the service, including master teachers who will conduct demonstration teaching, shall be required to prepare a DLP. Teachers who have been in service for at least 1 year, handling learning areas with available LMs and TGs provided by the department shall not be required to prepare a DLP. Instead, they shall be required to fill out a weekly daily lesson log. Newly hired teachers without professional teaching experience shall be required to prepare a daily detailed lesson plan or DLP for a year. However, newly hired teachers who earned a rating of very satisfactory or outstanding in the RPMS in a year shall no longer be required to prepare DLPs, while newly hired teachers who earned a rating of satisfactory shall still be required to prepare DLPs until such time their RPMS has improved. Let us now move on to starting the class right, laying down the curriculum plan. Before the class begins every day, a teacher must have written a lesson plan or lesson log. The main parts of the lesson plans are objectives or intended learning outcomes. Number 2, the subject matter, procedure or strategies of teaching, assessment of learning outcomes, and the assignment or agreement. Intended learning outcomes. These are the desired learning that will be the focus of the lesson. Learning outcomes are based on taxonomy of objectives presented to us as cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. And of course, it is formulated by Benjamin Samuel Bloom, an American educational psychologist who made contributions to the classification of educational objectives and to the theory of mastery of learning. Bloom's taxonomy has been revisited by his own student, Lauren Anderson and David Crathwell. Now let us study the comparison. In Bloom's taxonomy 1956, the lowest level of cognition is knowledge, followed by comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and the highest level is evaluation. In Revised Bloom's by Anderson 2001, the lowest level is remembering, then understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Somehow, the two are similar. However, the highest level of cognition in the revised version is creating. Take note that the original version is stated as nouns, while the revised version is stated as verbs, which implies more active form of thinking. Now let's take a quick look on Revised Bloom's taxonomy. There are three major changes in the revised taxonomy. These are changing the names in the 6 categories from nouns to verbs, then rearranging these categories, and establishing the levels of knowledge in the original version. Let us study the cognitive categories with example keywords which are verbs for each in the new version of Bloom's taxonomy. So we have remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Remembering, recall or retrieve previous learned information. The example keywords are defines, describes, identifies, labels, lists, outlines, selects, and states. Understanding, comprehend meaning, translation, state problem in own words, making meaning. Keywords comprehends, explains, distinguishes, estimates, give example, interprets, predicts, rewrites, summarizes. Applying, it is the use of concept in new situation. Applies what has been learned in new situation. Keywords applies, changes, computes, operates, constructs, modifies, uses, manipulates, prepares, shows, and solves. Analyzing, separate materials or concepts into component parts so that the organization is clear. Distinguishes between facts and inferences. Keywords, breaks down, compares, contrasts, diagrams, differentiates, discriminates, identifies, infers, outlines, relates, selects, and separates. Evaluating. Make judgments about the value of ideas or materials. Keywords. Appraises, compares, criticizes, defends, describes, discriminates, evaluates, interprets, justifies, and summarizes. Creating. To build a structure or pattern from various elements. Put parts together to create a whole, to make new meaning and structure. The keywords are composes, compiles, designs, generates, modifies, organizes, rearranges, reorganizes, revises, rewrites, summarizes, and creates.
Good day, everyone. I'm JONALYN MAGRAMO from San Agustin Central Elementary School. My task is to discuss the following objectives. Number 1, to give the meaning of knowledge. Number 2, to define knowledge. Number 3, to discuss the 4 levels of knowledge. Number 4, to explain the ways of teaching for different kinds of learners. And number 5, to discuss the students' different learning styles. What is knowledge? When you hear the word knowledge, what comes into your mind? Knowledge is a familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone or something, such as facts, information, descriptions of skills, which is acquired through experience or education, by perceiving, discovering, and learning. While Plato defined knowledge as justified true belief, well-adjusted true belief is a more complete definition. There are 4 levels of knowledge. The levels of knowledge were indicated in Bloom's taxonomy in the year 1956. There are only 3. We have the factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, and the procedural knowledge. But under the revision of Anderson and Krathwohl in the year 2001, metacognitive knowledge was added. Factual knowledge is the ideas, specific data, or information. It, it is also the basic elements must know to be acquainted with a discipline or solve problems. Conceptual knowledge, words or ideas known by common name, features, multiple specific examples, which may either concrete or abstract. It is also the interrelationships among the basic elements within a larger structure that enable them to function together. Procedural knowledge, how things work, step-by-step action, methods of inquiry, how to do something methods of inquiry, and criteria for using skills, algorithms, techniques, and methods. And last, metacognitive knowledge is the knowledge of cognition in general, awareness of knowledge of one's own cognition, thinking about thinking. There are different ways of teaching the different kinds of learners. Corpus and Salandanan, in year 2013, enumerated the following approaches and methods which may be useful for the different kinds of learners. Some are time-tested methods, while others are non-conventional constructivist methods. Let's come first to the direct demonstration methods. It is a way of teaching which is aimed at helping students acquire some basic skills and procedural knowledge. It is straightforward and is done in a step-by-step manner. The emphasis on how to execute the steps of the entire procedure. Some strategies used in direct instruction. Number 1, lecture and student presentation. Number 2, deduction. Number 3, expository or the didactic method. And number 4, we have the demonstration method. In direct instruction, the student gain how rather than what. Each step must be mastered. The examples are sample lessons with step-by-step tasks, executing the steps of a folk dance, steps in preparing a meal, writing a letter, and solving math problems. Best definition for direct demonstration method is what we are doing inside our classroom, modeling, so that our learners remember what we are teaching. Then number 2, we have the cooperative learning approaches. It involves students' cooperation to achieve a shared outcome, a structured interaction in small groups. It is peer tutoring, learning action cells, think, pair, share. It is applicable for our group activity. Children sharing their ideas with their classmates or partner in order to learn new knowledge. Then number 3, we have the deductive or inductive approaches. Deductive approach aims at testing an existing theory, while inductive approach aims at developing a theory. It begins with the abstract rule, generalization, principles, and ends with specific example and concrete details. Learning is passive process. The learner do not take part in the generalization or conclusion. Drill or exercises come after the explanation of the rule or principle. So it focuses on the teacher. I have here an example. In science subject, the teacher defined all animals with backbone are classified as vertebrates. Teacher give examples. Dog is vertebrate because it possesses backbone. Fish, frog, and cow are vertebrates. It possesses backbone. Another example in mathematics subject. Teacher explained the rule first. To add similar fractions, just add the numerators, then copy the denominator. Then the teacher will give examples, after which she will give written exercises for her pupils. Deductive method has advantage and disadvantage. The advantage, the teacher do not have to worry on what questions to ask for learners to generalization or conclusion. The disadvantage, passive learning, less involvement on part of the learners. Now, inductive method, it begins with specific details, concrete idea, and examples, and ends with an abstract. Learners are more engaged in the teaching learning process. Learning becomes more interesting at the outset because we begin with experiences of our students. Begin with what they know. It helps the development of our learners' higher order thinking skills to see patterns and analyze the same in order to arrive at generalization requires analytical thinking. Need much time to lead students to formulate generalization. In the inductive approach, it requires more time and so less subject matter will be covered. Example, in science subject, to find out the body parts of animals that it has a backbone. Teacher will say, the dog has a backbone. The fish, frog, and cow also have backbones. Then the students will conclude that the dog, fish, cow, and frog are vertebrates. Inductive approach has also advantage and disadvantage. The advantage, the learners are more engaged in teaching learning process. The learners formulate the generalization or rule. While the disadvantage in inductive approach, it requires more time and so less subject matter will be covered. Teacher needs much time to lead students to the formulation of generalizations. In inductive approach, it focuses more on the pupils or the student, while in deductive, it focuses on the teacher. Let's proceed to other approaches. It is a combination of different modes of delivery and models of teaching styles of learning. So now, in this time of pandemic, we have the blended learning approach, what we are using in our different schools. In our school, we are modular print. There are many classifications of learning styles according to the different authors. The multiple intelligence theory of Howard Gaymer implies several learning styles, but in our lesson, we will just focus on the three learning styles which are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. These three preferred styles can help teachers choose the method and the materials they will use. First is visual. Uses graphs, charts, and pictures. Tends to remember things that are written in form. And here is the tips for teachers. Turn notes into pictures, diagrams, maps. Learn the big picture first, then details. Make mind maps and concept maps. Number 2, auditory. Recalls information through hearing and speaking. Prefers to be told how to do things orally. Learns aloud. So the tip for teacher, record lectures and listen to this. Repeat materials out loud. Parrots, read aloud. And number 3, kinesthetic. Prefers hands-on approach. Demonstrates how to do rather than explain. Likes group work with hand and minds on. Learn something while doing another thing. Eats while studying. Work while standing. Like field work. Do many things at one time. If you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got. We, as a teacher, we must accept change and learn new things. We don't only focus on what we already know, but discover new knowledge, ideas, methods, and techniques. Thank you.
Good day, teachers, especially to our Professor Doc Bong. I am ROSALY Molina, and my assigned topic is about teaching and learning must be supported by instructional materials or IMs. Considering the teaching methodologies and the learning styles, the different support material should be varied. This will ensure that the individual differences will be considered. Instructional material should be complement visual, auditory, and tactile or a combination of the three. However, following Dale's cone of learning, which is a visual device, can help teachers to make decisions on what resources and materials will maximize learning. In cone of learning, after 2 weeks we tend to remember 10% of what we read by reading, 20% of what we hear by hearing words, and 30% of what we see is by looking at pictures, which is by verbal receiving, and 50% of what we hear and see is by watching a movie, looking at an exhibit, watching a demonstration, seeing it done on location. This is by visual receiving. And 70% of what we say is by participating in a discussion or giving a talk. And 90% of what we say and do is doing a dramatic presentation or simulating the real experience and doing the real thing. So what instructional support materials will the teachers use according to the learning styles and the outcomes to be achieved? Here are some guidelines. Number 1, use of direct purposeful experience. The learning by doing retains almost all of the learning outcomes. 90% of learning is retained. Examples are field trip, field study, community immersion, and practice teaching. 2. Participation in class activities, discussion, reporting, and similar activities where learners have the opportunity to talk and write. 70% of learning is remembered. Examples are small group discussion, bus session, individual reporting, role play, and panel. Number 3, passive participation as in watching a movie, viewing exhibit, watching demonstration will retain around 50% of what has been communicated. Number 4, by just looking at still pictures, paintings, illustrations, and drawings will allow the retention of around 30% of the material's content. By hearing as in lecture, sermon, monologues, only 20% is remembered. Reading will ensure 10% remembering of the material. Regardless of the amount of remembering from the concrete to abstract, each layer contributes to learning and requires instruction support materials. By visual, concrete or abstract. Audio, recording of sounds, natural or artificial. Audiovisual, combination of what can be seen and heard. Kinesthetic, manipulative materials like modeling clay, rings, dumbbells, equipments, and others. By experiential, it is utilize all modalities. Thank you for listening. God bless us.
Good day everyone, my topic is all about categories of curriculum change. The categories of curriculum change according to McNeil in 2000 are substitution, alteration, restructuring, perturbations, and values orientation. The first category of curriculum change is substitution. In substitution, the current curriculum will be replaced or substituted by a new one. Sometimes we call this a complete overhaul. An example of substitution is that changing an old book to an entirely new one, not merely a revision. Number 2 is alteration. In alteration, there is a minor change in the current or existing curriculum. An example of this is that instead of using graphing paper in the mathematics teaching, it can be altered by a graphing calculator. The third one is restructuring. Building a new structure would mean a major change in the school system, degree program, or educational system. Using an integrated curriculum for the whole K-12 program requires the primary and secondary levels to work as a team. Another example of a curriculum that is restructured is when there is a significant involvement of the parent in the child instead of leaving everything to the teacher. The in-school, off-school, or blended curriculum is an example of restructuring. The fourth one is perturbations. There are changes that are disruptive, but the teachers have to adjust them within the fairly short time. An example of this is that when the principal changes the time schedule in order to catch up for the national testing time, the teacher shortens schedule to accommodate the unplanned or unexpected extracurricular activities. The fifth one is value orientation. To McNeil, it is a type of curriculum change. Perhaps this classification will respond to shift in the emphasis that the teacher provides, which are not within the mission or vision of the school, or vice versa. For example, when new teachers who are recruited in religious school give emphasis on academics and forget the formative of faith or values, they need a curriculum orientation, value orientation. Likewise, all teachers in the public school undergo teacher induction program, which is a special curriculum for newly hired teachers. Regardless of the change in curriculum and implementation, the process of change may contain three important elements. As a process, curriculum implementation should be developmental, participatory, and supportive. It should be developmental in the sense that it should develop multiple perspectives, increase integration, and make learning autonomous, create climate of openness and trust, and appreciate and affirm strengths of the teacher. There should be teacher support in trying new tasks, reflections on the new experiences and challenges. There are simple stages in the developmental change process for the teacher. First is orientation and preparation. The initial use is very mechanical or routinary. However, as the skills are honed and mastery of the routine is established, refinement follows. This means adjustments are made to better meet the needs of the learners and achieve the learning outcomes. In this step, there will be continuous reflection, feedback, and refinement. The next element of curriculum change is participatory. For a curriculum implementation to succeed, it should be participatory, especially because other stakeholders like peers, school leaders, parents, and curriculum specialists are necessary. The third one is supportive. Supportive curriculum implementation is required in the process of change. Material support like supplies, equipment, and conducive learning environment like classrooms and laboratory should be made available. Likewise, human support is very much needed. The school leader or head should provide full school or institutional support to the implementation of the new curriculum. They have to train to understand how to address curriculum change as a part of their institutional as well as a management function. Time. Time is an important commodity for a successful change process. For any innovations to be fully implemented, period of 3 to 5 years to institutionalize a curriculum is suggested. Time is needed by the teachers to plan, adapt, train, or practice, provide the necessary requirements, and get support. Time is also needed to determine when the implementation starts and when it will conclude, since curriculum implementation is time-bound. Support from peers, principal, external stakeholders will surely add to the success of the implementation. When the teachers share ideas, work together, solve problems, create new materials, and celebrate success, more likely that curriculum implementation will be welcomed.